Well, the Lord has been good to us. I told Bonnie as we were eating breakfast this morning and talking a little bit, this really was, in my terms, Black Sunday. Because when we got up this morning 50 years ago, which was one day off, it was the second, we had no church. We had no congregation. We had nothing. And so it was a black day. It was a hard day. And we'll be sharing some of that, but we have three people here that in the beginning took a position so that we could function and make it as a church. Janet became our church secretary, kind of a do-all person. And she was allowed to have any type of an office that she wanted, as long as she had it in her basement and kept it clean. And so Janet jumped into it with both feet. So I'm going to ask Janet to come and share what it was like 50 years ago, starting next Sunday.
You didn't tell me how long I had, so I can't reach this.
I'll get it for you. Do you want to stand or do you need to sit?
I can stop.
You okay?
I'm okay to stand.
Okay. Is that good for you?
That's good for me, yeah. In the summer of 1970, my cousin Sharon Hinkle invited me and my girls to Vacation Bible School. Tracy was 4 and Lisa was almost 2. They're here today. I stayed and helped with Vacation Bible School because they were short on hand. Joyce was the director that year. And Tracy was in Marcella Wilkie's class. And she didn't want to leave Marcella, ever. Marcella finally told her when she was getting a pretty good size, she said, "You can't be in my class when you graduate high school, Tracy." She didn't want to leave. So in November 1971, I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior. I still have Him. So good, so good. And then there was an opening for a bookkeeper and a secretary. And Joyce was hired as the bookkeeper. I was hired as the secretary. I had a good boss. He'd come cruising in every morning in a blue Mustang. Some days when he'd have that convertible top down and his hair wouldn't blow. So then Easter Sunday of 1973 was a beautiful Sunday, but High Street was full. It was packed that day. And then one morning Jack came in and he said, "I got something to talk to you about." And I thought, am I in trouble? Did I do something wrong? Wasn't the case. He said, "I had a vision. I had a vision of buses coming in with loads of kids all over the county. A nursing home. We don't have that yet, and all good things. It was a new church. Retirement, housing, we got that. So, and he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Oh, I knew Jack enough to know that if he and God had something planned, Jack was going to do anything to make it happen. Worked hard. So we had an organizational meeting at the Armory down in City Park. Had about 30 people there. And we started the third church. I never liked that name, but we had that. That was our first one. And I set up a office in my basement. And Lisa, she skated around me while I was working. And so we had, Jack brought a mimeograph machine. You know what a mimeograph machine is? I asked Lisa if she knew what a mimeograph machine was, and she said, no. Well, that's what we did our first, and there's a copy of it here. We did our first bulletin on a mimeograph machine. Jack brought out Tony's ping pong table, and we set up the mimeograph on that. And in a mimeograph machine, you have to put a fluid, like paint removers, what it smelled like. Well, I think it was because I spilled it one day and took the paint right off of Tony's ping pong table. And so I told Jack about it. I was all upset. He just grinned. I don't know what Tony thought about it. I never heard that, but he probably wasn't too happy. Then we started church at the Eastern Star Temple. We would go, set up chairs, have church, take down chairs, clean up, go home. Come back on a Wednesday. We usually had Wednesday night service in the back room, didn't we? In the back room, so we didn't have enough to go out front. We didn't have to set up chairs. We just sat around the table, and we sang. We had good church. We acquired this land from Lena Cottrell. That was Paul Roll's sister, Mary Ellen's husband. And Joyce's favorite saying to Jack was, Jack! Because he was always asking her to do something, pay a bill, and she was having a hard time with paying bills. So, but we made it. We made it. And you remember the Hogan's Heroes, the TV show, had the F Troop? Jack had the F Troop. I think they should have been called the C Troop for committed, or maybe the D Troop for dedicated, because they sure were. It was my dad, Dow Summers, my Uncle Gene Neff, Everett Gearhart, Bill Brakefield, Warren Gray, Bob Rittinger, Clayton Porter, Jimmy Lowe. They would work all day and through the night. And then the younger guys would come when they'd get off work. They would have like the second shift, but a lot of the older guys stayed and helped. Bud Overman and Gene Smalley, they helped. I ran into Bud the other day, and he's still working. He's only 94. People had a mind to work. They worked hard, but they also had fun. And the women would bring food, banquets, really. And the guys would eat. And then the women would stay and help. The women were the gophers, go get what the guys needed. And they also stayed to help them because they had to keep them going, because after those big meals, they'd slow down a little bit. And If you know Jack, you know he's afraid of electric and snakes. My dad, Jack was up on the scaffolding working up here in the middle, and my dad touched his leg with a wire. It was just a wire, not attached to anything. Jack about fell off the scaffolding. And they all laughed, but when my dad got home, he told Mom, he said, "I'll never do that again." He said, "I was more scared than Jack was." And I don't think he did. But Gene, he was ornery. And he would bring Jack and Bonnie vegetables out of his garden. One day, he put a paper sack in Jack's truck with vegetables and a rubber snake. You didn't think that was funny, did you? No. No. When we moved into this building, Joyce and Andy and I and Jack, we had an office. And Andy had his print shop upstairs where it slopes down in that teeny tiny area. He'd bump his head. But we had a nice office. We had good people to work with. And I was always telling Jack, mailings get people here. When we put out a mailing, we have more people. So we kept Andy pretty busy doing mailings. And so Jack, one day he said, there's going to be a conference in Circleville. He's grinning, he remembers this. He said, would you do me graphs on how many people were here after a mailing, how many were not here after a mailing? I said, sure, so I worked on it. And then he said, would you take it to Circleville for me and set it up? And I said, sure. So we went, and I was setting it up, and Jack left the room. And I was finishing up, and I thought, I was talking to some of the people there, and Jack didn't show up. And I thought, what's going on? Pretty soon he meanders into the room, sits down in the back, and said, you're doing fine. You just go ahead. I hadn't seen the brochure on who was doing what. Didn't know my name was in there as a teacher of that class. He forgot to tell me. But we just had several, made good friends. And I have so many friends that I've had for over 50 years. Joyce and I are still super close. And I thank God for you. Thank God for all of you.
Thank you, Janet. We knew that as a church we were going to grow because that was the will of God. We knew that. So we knew we were going to have to take care of a financial situation. And so we asked Joyce to be our accountant and take care of the books, income, tithe, and all that. And Joyce did such a wonderful job of it. And I've asked Joyce to come and share some of her memories of Joyce. Would you rather sit down, Joyce?
It's not going to be there very long.
Make sure you stay in front of the mic so they can hear you.
It's so good to see every one of you here today. I've missed all of you, and it's just one of those things that you can't always make it. I have a few things, and I see people that started with different things, the school and everything. I just think it's remarkable what God has done here with every one of you. My reading is not very long. I did not know we were going to have this, although while I worked, I kept a notebook, and I asked Jack for it to get some ideas, and so I have brought it today to give back to him of things that we did. Mostly these things that are on here is what I have in there, but in the back of it, I have obituaries of those wonderful people that were with us at one time, but they have gotten the goal. So I'll read what I have. I said that I worked for the church as bookkeeper for 23 years, and I had that things really began to start at Eastern Star Temple, where we held the service until we started with some 30 adult members and grew. We had a service in the fellowship building, the senior center, and the Porter Center. Since we didn't have much money, we improvised a lot. On Sundays at the temple, as Janet mentioned, we would put up the folding chairs, take them down after the service, and we did this every time there was a service. I remember my old office as being in the kitchen, I think, now. The only reason I said I remember that was because I had a friend in that room, and it was a bear. We had a painting put on the wall, and the bear was my company. But anyway, where or how it happened, the painting got covered up and painted over. Anyway, for our daily work, we filed the envelopes, and the elders counted the offering. We had different fundraisers to get money for our church. Some were 30 pieces of silver, $500 for a Brookside Bible, and other gifts. The first large offering was $15,000. The biggest Easter offering was given at Union Otis School, was our sacrificial giving, as we raised $32,000 in cash, savings bonds, jewelry, and many other things were given. The people prayed, and God blessed. One other part I enjoyed was Bible school, and we had the Bible school down over the hill, and we had a first aid station. By being a group, we had to have something, so we had a trailer, and this was our first aid station if someone got hurt or something came up. And Linda Wooten was our nurse, and we had it, and everybody enjoyed it because it was open. We just had a good time down over the hill. The next thing, I guess, I thought I really remember, one part that I got to do and see was the 30-foot lighted steeple that went on the top of the church. Helping as pews were delivered, painting after a water leak, taking a gift of flowers to new babies' mothers. This is just some of the things I got to do and see while I was working at the church. God has blessed abundantly, and many souls brought to God. To God be the glory.
Janet both had gray hair. I don't know whether working and doing what they did had some bearing on that or not. But, you know, when we did different things and we did it by faith, eventually wound up at Joyce's desk saying, we need a check for $32,000. Joyce sometimes would say, we don't have that kind of money. And so we'd have to get busy and start praying and believing. And the money always came in. God always blessed. Well, she's been to a couple of people mentioned about Andrew. We couldn't find anybody else, so we got saddled with him, I reckon. And Andy was probably one of the finest linotype operators in this area. He knew printing he just knew it. And so some of the things he did here, he'll be talking about it. So Andy, come on up here. Andy made himself a little plaque that he had up on the wall. And I go and say, I want something. You want it when? And so, if you look at these things, you'll see a little bit of what he did. I remember one year, Andy, and you'll have to go over to the microphone.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, Andy printed over 100,000 pieces of, and this, as Janet said, we found out mailings made all the difference in the world. So we were always passing them out, passing them out, passing them out. Andrew, tell us your story.
Using this mic. Bring it up here, okay.
Well, I was printing so many little things for Jack, and it was just coming all the time with stuff. I accused him of taking them up in an airplane and just throwing them all out the window, because it just was overwhelming at times. But I kind of made a little joke a couple months ago when he said I was going to have to talk about this, and I don't know if anybody in here caught it or not, but I said, I made the mistake of telling Jack I worked in a print shop and could run everything in it. I said that was a mistake, because it wasn't long after that he came to me and asked if I would do some printing for the new church. So I thought, well, 100 bulletins every week, I can do that. So I said, okay. So we got Janet all set up in her house, and we started mimeographing bulletins and putting them out. And we didn't have any folder at the time or anything. You'd have to take it and fold it like this and take a pencil and run it down here to get your fold on it. And that's how we folded all our bulletins. And so we started out in her house, and somehow somebody bought A.B. Dick offset press. And next thing I know, it's going down into my basement. So we had that, and the press wasn't all you needed to do to make a run. You had to buy a camera that you could take the pictures of your copy and make negatives of it, and then you had to make the negatives, put them on a plate, and burn the image on the plate and put the plate on the press, and that's how you got everything. You had all this equipment to try and get the press running and everything. So we started out in the Eastern Star Temple, and there was enough of us there that we had a small Sunday school class. And my wife Joy was teaching the little tiny kids there one day, and she heard a little commotion in the back, and so she stopped and asked what was going on. The boy said, "You said a bad word." And she stopped and thought, and she couldn't figure out what was going on. She was trying to explain to everybody. He said, "You said jackass." And she was trying to explain everything that he had to do to get the new church going and how busy he was. And after she got done with all of her talking, she said, "Now you know what a big problem Jack has." And so we went on from there. But we got the press going, and they started working out here to build this building. And I started working in the basement. We had to have a dark room. I put a dark room in there and put all of our equipment in there. And between going to Janet's and Joyce's, they would get the copy ready for whatever we needed. And we'd get it ready for the press and take it down to my basement, and we'd run it off in my basement and bring it out here and hand it out to everybody. And we did that quite a while while they were building this building. And when they got the building built, they brought my press up out of the basement, and we put it upstairs in the corner there. And I went up there and did my work on the press up there. Well, there wasn't much room there, and the beams are coming down, and there was a beam coming right beside the press, and it was all I could do to get it around here to work on the press. And I can't tell you how many times I banged my head on that beam, but maybe that's what's happened to me now. But so we had that, and we was just busy all the time. He was coming up with all kinds of stuff to print, and we were printing away and getting ready to move over. They were started to build the other building, and we would meet in here in the mornings on Sunday mornings, and we'd gotten 2 house trailers and had them outside. We were using them for Sunday school classes, so we would all gather in here in the morning, and we'd have a opening song and a prayer and announcements, and then they would disperse our people to their different areas for the Sunday school classes. So Everett Gerhardt was Sunday school superintendent, and I was an assistant. And one morning he said, "Andy, I can't be there next Sunday. Will you take over the opening exercises for me?" So I said, "Okay." So the next Sunday I got up and I said, "Everett couldn't be here today, and he asked me to lead the opening exercises today." And I said, "I've never done this before, but here goes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And Jack was over here by the side door. I thought he was going to leave for a minute, but he didn't. So that's how we got going. So while I'm up here printing, they're working mostly on the new building, and they had all of the cement poured in the building. It was all nice and dry and everything, and somehow we got a hold of a paper cutter, and it was an enormous thing, hundreds of pounds, big thing, and it had a blade on it about like that, and you would run this thing down on your paper, and it would hold the paper tight, and then you'd take this arm and pull it over here, and the blade would come down and go through all of that and cut all your paper off, really nice. And then you'd put it back up and undo it and take your paper out. Well, that was so heavy and so big and cumbersome, they slid that thing onto the new cement before even the walls was going up on the new building, and we slid that in and put it where we thought it'd be in the office. And that was the first thing in the new building, was that big paper cutter. So we had that taken care of. So I'm working over here, getting all this stuff done. And we were doing all kinds of little things, offering envelopes and stuff. And I had one little paper that we did, and it said on here different things you could do if you needed to talk to the pastor or anything. And you would fill out this thing and put it in the offering pan, and then they would take care of it, and you could do what it was that was on here. And if you needed to see anybody in the hospital, a prayer request, it was all on here. So I'm printing a bunch of these, and down here it says, I would like to talk to the pastor. So I'm printing all of these, and all at once the suction cups didn't pick up one right, and it went through sideways, and the last line didn't get printed on this thing. So I looked at it, and it said, I would like to talk. And that's all it said. Well, we had a lady in our church that Jack affectionately called Gabby. So I saved this, and we took it over and gave it to her. It says, I would like to talk. And we made sure that she got that. So that was fun. So I'm printing away on this stuff, and we kept coming up with ideas all the time. And we decided, we took a nice picture in the front of the church, and we decided we would make it the front of our bulletins. So this was our bulletins, and we used this black and white picture of the church. Well, we decided we'd take a color picture of the church and see if we could put it on there. So somehow Jack found this place, I don't know where it was, but they took our nice color picture of the front of this church, and we decided to use it for the bulletin cover. Well, this place could separate colors out of this color picture that we used. And it was just crazy. That you had your yellow negative, and then you had a red negative, and then you put your red over top of that. And I kept wondering where the blue was, or the green was, because we had a lot of grass and everything, but all we had was red, yellow, blue, and black. And I ran it through the press and put this right over top of it, and it was pretty hard to get it exact on that press. So we got ready to do the blue, and as soon as that blue hit that red and the black, it made the prettiest green you ever saw. And then we put the black on for the detail, and we ran it through the press. So I ran about a half a year's supply of bulletin covers. And you had to run it through 4 times to get your colors over top of each other. And hopefully it was close to being right. And I was pretty surprised when we got done. 99% of them looked really nice. And so that's how we started doing our bulletin cover. So the man that sold us the press, he would come in every now and then and see if we needed anything or how we were doing. And he took a look at that, and I told him what we'd done on that press, and he looked at it and he said, this press is not designed to do this type of work. He said, we're not, it's not registered close enough, and he says, it's just not built to do color work like this. And he looked at that, and he took some of the bulletins with him, took him back to his office to show his bosses and potential buyers of the presses, I guess. And so I was really surprised. We were the first ones to ever do color work on that type of a press. And that was kind of fun. So I do about a half a year's supply of this. It took forever to get them all done, all colors and everything on there. And we'd set them over in the corner, and then each week take off what we need for the bulletins for that week. And it was a lot of fun. So the man that sold us the press I got to be pretty good friends with him. And come to find out, he married one of the daughters of one of our pastors in our denomination. And just so happened that she'd worked with me in the denominational print shop in Circleville for 2 or 3 years, so I knew her really well. So every 3 months or so, he and his wife, me and my wife, my best man and his wife, and a couple from Circleville First Church, we all went to First Church when we were younger. We would all get together and go to Mount Sterling to Ben and Joy's restaurant. And the owner lady, her name was Joy, and she would give us the separate room, and we had that room all to ourselves, and we'd eat and talk in there, and we could stay as long as we wanted to. And she had a piano in that room, and she would play softly music for us while we had our meeting. And it was really a nice time to do that all the time. We had a great time. So let's see, what else did we do? We kept working on our color stuff, and there was a lot of things, other little things we were doing, just coming up with stuff all the time, and I've got a lot of it here. And every 4 or 5 years, you'd have to buy new rollers for our press. And it was about time our rollers were starting to go bad on it. And Jack had retired from our church about a year, and we had David Dean in as pastor then. So I went to David and I said, David, our rollers are starting to get bad on the press. We're going to need some new rollers. And he said, well, now all this time, this is 19 years, technology has passed us by, and the stuff they had in the office that the ladies was working on was very, very nice. And they could do almost the same thing that I was doing with all of our equipment in the print shop. And so I said, we need new rollers. It'll be about $2,000 for the rollers. He said, well, Andy, he said, we think we'd like to try and do it in the office. And I don't think we'll get any new rollers for our press. And so I thought, well, we can't run it without rollers, so I guess we're done. And I picked up my stuff and walked out and headed for the house. And they went and took over everything in the office. The girls in the office was doing almost the same thing that we were doing. And so I walked home with a sense of pride that I'd done all of that, but also a big sense of relief because it was almost overwhelming, because I was taking off time from work and working my days off. I'd come home at 11 o'clock at night and work till 4 and 5 in the morning on printing stuff, and it was just really an enormous job. So one morning, 5 o'clock, I was getting done, and I turned out the lights, and just as I started to go out, I heard the door open, and here come Jack in. And so I just stood there by the light switch in the dark, and I just stood there. And so Jack comes walking over, and he gets right up to about this close to me and realized there's a man standing right in front of him. And he went, and I thought, uh-oh. I said, I think this is about the last time I'm going to do this to him, because that's probably the closest he ever come to having a major heart attack. So I said, that's it for that. So we never did that anymore. But we had a lot of fun working, and we got a lot of good stuff out. We had to do mailings and stuff, and we sent them to all of the members of our churches when we'd have something special going on. And we had to get the word out that we were doing something over here, building a new church and everything. And so it was quite lengthy, the things we did to keep things going. So we were really busy, and I put in 19 good years working in the print shop here.
You can come up here and look at some of the stuff he's done, and some of it's pretty complicated, but we tried to give him all the help that we could. We give him ink and paper and everything like that. So Andy made it possible. If you look here, there's a lot of stuff here that we passed out. One of the goals that we had and that we did as a church in those early days, because people didn't know Brookside Church or Third Church. They didn't know it was out here in the country. So we decided and we set the goal that we would knock on 100 doors every week. And so Andy, a lot of it here is stuff that we passed out. And we come up with a system so when somebody was really interested, we could put down their address, and we had maps made that we could say to anyone, go see them, and they could look on the map and know where to go to. Those maps become pretty popular, and at one point, every sheriff cruiser in Ross County had a set of those maps so they could find people easier. And so, of course, now they don't need that. They got all kinds of things that you don't need. This morning, as I thought about this day 50 years ago, I told Bonnie, I said, it's really Black Sunday. Because when we got up 50 years ago on this day, one day removed, it was on the 2nd instead of the 3rd. For the first time since I've been a Christian, we didn't have a church, didn't have a people, didn't know what we was going to do hardly. And I wrote down some things, and Bonnie and I thought about not saying it, and then I really thought about not saying it after I saw the video. But I thought, well, this is how it was, so I'm going to tell you. On November the 3rd, and Janet made reference to this, in 1973 at the Armory in the park, the Third Church of Christ and Christian Union was organized. Reverend Grover Blankenship, the South Central District Superintendent, presided over the meeting and organized the Third Church. The Third Church was this church, which became Brookside, was organized by action of the High Street Church Board, the South Central District Church Board, and the General Board of our organization. And that happened on November the 23rd. The following Sunday, on November the 25th, we had church as usual at High Street with myself preaching, and the people that we had that were teachers at that point were teaching and serving. And then the district superintendent on Wednesday, November the 28th, came to Bonnie and I, met with us after the midweek service, the prayer meeting service at High Street, which they asked us not to attend that service. And during that meeting with our district superintendent, we were told that we were not to go back to High Street and that they would have a fill-in pastor that would be coming to take care of the pastoral responsibilities. They told Bonnie and I that we had 2 weeks to move out of the parsonage, and this was in December, headed toward Christmas. And so that was, when I say Black Sunday, we woke up on that Sunday knowing we had to find a place to move. So we were looking at apartments and different things, trying to figure out how we could move, what we could do. And finally, Everett came to us because he had a need of someone to take care of his farm while he was still working, and said if we would take care of the cattle and other things, that we could live in the old farmhouse. So we moved into that old farmhouse. Now, when we met on that Wednesday night and we were told to move within the 2-week period, also the pay at our church then was 1 week behind. In other words, you always had a week coming. So they said the week, this week, you'll get your check, but that will be the last check that you'll get. So when we got up, we didn't have a job, we didn't have the money, and we really was asking God, what are we really going to do? And so on that December the 2nd, we did not have a church. So before the next Sunday, we were looking for a place to have church, and we found the Eastern Star Temple. That created a lot of controversy in some people's minds that didn't like us to start with. Why we would go to the Eastern Star Temple and have church. Pretty simple, it's the only place we could find. And they treated us pretty good. And so I think Janet mentioned putting the chairs up and putting the chairs down. So we knew we weren't going to have very many people. So when we put the chairs up, if I figured we was going to have 35 people in worship, we'd put up 20 chairs. Now some of these ideas, you may not like it, but I went to my Uncle Fred. Uncle Fred run 4 taverns at one time successfully. And I said to Uncle Fred, I need some ideas. How do you do something like that, you know? And he knew I was starting the church. And so Uncle Fred gave me some ideas. And I did those ideas. But we would, if we were going to have 35 people, is what we thought, we put up 20 chairs. And when people would say to people that came to the service, how's it going? We had to carry in more chairs. And when we didn't know there's going to be that many chairs to be that far apart. I mean, we could have probably put 2 rows of chairs and had everybody on them almost, but we scattered them all out and looked like we had a pretty decent crowd. And so the Lord began to work with us and began to help us. And we lived in that little house out there. And they hadn't lived in it for a while, so the rats had moved in. Bonnie said this morning, I think it was, or last night, well, maybe it was Becky was talking about rats. And she said, you know, you was afraid to go to the bathroom because the rats would be in there. And I felt like carrying my .22 with me when I went to the bathroom to kill the rats. And so it was a difficult time. We laugh about it now. But I'm going to tell you, a lot of nights, Bonnie and I cried together and prayed together. God, you got to help us. And in the midst of all of that turmoil, a large Nazarene church in Roanoke, Virginia called us up, because we were doing church growth conferences and different things at that point, and wanted to interview us to be pastor. Ready-made church, good salary, but we said can't do it. That's not what God wants. We have to stick with what God wants. The devil knows how to tempt you. And so we tried to stay with it. And we began to organize. And we began to pray. And God helped us. When Bonnie needed some money, there'd be somebody need a roof done or something. And we did roofing and fixed automobiles and anything we could do to make money to keep body and soul together. The church did what they could. I don't remember what it was, Joyce. Maybe you do. I don't remember. And but we kept working at it. And God was so very good to us. I'm like Janet. I didn't like the term third church. I don't like to be third in anything, do you? I mean, I don't know who won the ball game last night, but whoever come out second wasn't very happy. So when I think about the third church, it wasn't very long we was working on how that we would name it. And someone came up with a term of Brookside. But we became, because of what we'd been through, we became very strong in what it was that we were going to do as a church. And I knew what it took to grow a church. I've been working in that and seeing it happen. And I knew if we were going to continue to grow and see things develop, there had to be changes made in how we thought. This is one of the papers of the third church, and just let me read it to you. And some people said, well, you guys were pretty strong about this, but we were. We just simply said, I'm going to close with this. For our church to grow, the final essential will be the willingness of the church to make whatever changes are necessary in order to evangelize its Jerusalem. You notice the banner that Chillicothe is our Jerusalem. The status quo operations of many churches have them in such a rut that changes are very difficult. The church that never changes will never experience any significant growth. Change and growth go hand in hand. I am not saying that all changes will produce growth. Some changes cause decline, but there will never be any significant growth without appropriate accompanying changes. We must always be open to change, now and in the future. We still must be open to change. We're living in it's going to take something different to reach my grandkids for Jesus Christ than it did to reach us or those that were in the age group in between us. And the most popular phrase heard around dying churches is this: we've never done it that way before. Man is a creature of habit, is prone to resist change. And we are the product of our heredity, environment, subconscious mind, and the effect of the mind on us. Our experiences, habits, attitudes, and our position in life all determine how we accept change. But we have the mind power to affect, use, control, or harmonize all of these things for change and growth if we desire to. May we be determined to change what change is for the better. And I believe that Christianity today is a dynamic, living, growing experience. And I still believe that. And the day that Brookside Church makes its mind up, we'll do no more changing. It's the day that we start to die. I thank God we have a staff and a lead pastor that will make the changes that are necessary. We certainly don't do things like we used to do. But if we did, we'd be dying. You say, well, I just like it the old way. Well, maybe you do. But just kind of buckle up your shoes and get involved and permit God to touch us and God to help us. So when I think about all the things that have happened, and I stand here and look at some of you, I think about men that worked on this building. Most of them are dead. I just wonder how many would raise your hand and say, I helped on this building. Just put your hand up. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 or 6 of us. You see, the church is still a growing dynamic. And people around us are still lost. I still believe in a heaven and a hell. And I believe that God wants people to go to heaven. Now, one of the problems we got into as a church, and I would tell you it was a major problem for a good while, we were getting all kinds of people in our church. And that's what we said we wanted. The door would not be closed to anybody, and it wasn't. I was known on a first name basis by most of the deputies at the Ross County Sheriff's Department. We had kids coming in on the buses that were thieves. We had kids coming on the buses, and probably some that were coming in with mom and dads that were certainly not what you would really want to have in the church. But we loved them. And we wanted God to work a miracle in their life. And I saw some of those miracles happen. Some years went by, and one of those rascals that was involved in making my head hurt and my heart hurt and keep me up at night gave me a phone call. And he said, "Jack, just wanted to call and tell you and the church thanks for putting up with me when I was growing up. I was such a character." He said, "I bet you can't know what I'm doing now." I had a notion to say, "Well, I got a good idea. You're in prison somewhere trying to get somebody to help you get out." He said, "I'm chief of police," and named the town. Brookside can never get to the place where we're too good for anyone to come in our fellowship. We must never get to the place where one person in another church said to me when I did a church growth meeting with them, and they said, "How do we know if we do this, we know we'll grow. How do we know who we're going to get?" And I said, "You don't know. You have to take them as they come." They said, "We won't do it then." You see, we have to change. And we have to keep on changing. Now, you're going to see change next Sunday morning. And I know Bonnie's going to be after me because it's time for us to go. But next Sunday morning, you're going to have our lead pastor preaching. You're going to have David Dean preaching. And I'm going to preach. Now, we've only got 10 minutes apiece. Now, if you can see David Dean landing his plane in 10 minutes, and I've been joking with him about that on our emails. When I preach, and this is a personal thing with me, came out of a farmhouse meeting with God way years ago when the Holy Spirit spoke to me so forcefully about that issue in my life. Sunday, I'll have a suit on. Ryan is going to have on probably Dockers or something like that and a shirt. I'm not real sure where David's going to be. But I can tell you he's not going to have on Levi's, and so you're going to see a difference. But none of that stuff is important. It's not important. It's the message. And this church still preaches the message of the cross. And we need to thank God for the staff. Ralph was part of it, to others of you. Wes here. Thank God for the staff we've got and for the lead pastor. He's my pastor. And I've told him, and I thought it was going to be about over now, but I told him, I said, "Now listen, Ryan, when I die, I want you to preach my funeral, but do a good job of it too." I want you to know I love God today. When my time comes, and you hear people say, "Well, you guys done this, you guys done that, why would you do that?" And here's my quote that I read about David. David said, "I served my generation." I served my generation. It's up to Ralph and Wes, others, to serve their generation. God bless you. Ralph, got anything?